Well, good afternoon if you are in New York City or somewhere on the East Coast of the United States or South America. Good evening if you are in Surrey or somewhere in the United Kingdom, perhaps
Yeah.
in Lancashire, even London. Uh, Hello to people all around the world. This is Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. Adagio, as you well know, is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. My guest today is Brindley Sherratt, a bass from Great Britain, from Lancashire, from Surrey, from every great theater in the world. He's someone I've always wanted to converse with. I admire his work greatly, but we've never really met or had the chance to get to know one another. So, Brindley, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's really good. I think I mentioned to you, Fred, in a previous email somewhere that I've always kind of hoped that you would interview me at some point.
And
So,
I'm glad you asked because you were on my list. And I thought, well, I have to get good at this before I ask Brindley Sherratt. So
no,
the
no,
timing worked out.
no, it's
Now,
great.
um, in I've heard you perform a lot.
Mm,
I have looked over a lot of what you've done in your career,
mm,
and something about the trajectory of your career for basses is something that I've thought about a lot.
yeah.
I think that people who give scholarships, bursaries for young singers should give more money to basses than sopranos or tenors. And the
Mm,
reason for that is
mm,
that the basses don't really come into their own until
yeah,
they're older.
mm,
And in your case, you played the trumpet for a lot of years, and then you
yeah,
were in a professional chorus, but you
mm,
made your solo debut, if I'm correct, at the age of 36.
yeah, yeah,
So should we
yeah,
create a foundation, base support?
yeah, yeah. I say to any young bassists that I happen to have the chance to coach or mentor, I say, yeah, sometimes they say to me, it's really hard. It's quite boring. I said, well,
Mhm.
it's going to be boring for about another 10 years. And, just take that because our trajectory is very different.
A number of years ago, I
Mm.
don't know if you ever met Veronica Dunn, Ronnie Dunn, who was a great singing teacher
Yeah.
in Ireland. She sort
Mm.
of created the
Mm.
national way of
Yeah.
teaching singing. And she and
Yeah.
I did a master class together. We had these wonderful young Irish singers,
Yeah.
and the
Mm.
sopranos and the tenors and the baritones all had a lot to bring. There was
Yeah.
a 20-year-old, very bashful bass, very
Yeah.
tall, very handsome, very Irish looking with red hair and so on.
Yeah.
But they couldn't quite find what to work on because he
Yeah.
was so new, and Veronica
Yeah.
Dunn was a powerhouse of a woman and connected with these very dynamic sopranos that she worked with and
Mm.
mezzos. But somehow this poor bass was very tall.
Yeah.
Um, he didn't know how to receive knowledge from her, and she
Mm.
tried to work with him, but he didn't
Yeah.
have the vocabulary yet.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're a really good young bass, when technically the voice you've got a fairly solid 2 octaves, it's really hard to find something that suits your voice or anything that you'll be employed for the next 10 years. And everybody tends to sing the same few arias, which are really for much older men.
Hmm.
Because you say, well, let's start with Mozart. Everybody should sing Mozart. Well, if you're a bass who hasn't quite got the top sorted out yet, Figaro's a bit high, Zarastro is a bit low.
Hmm.
uh, and Leporello is the kind of go-to role I put guys on because the aria is tricky. It's got the first 2 pages has some nasty high notes in it, but you have to learn. I make them do it because they need to learn how to do it, but because the rest of the role of Leporello is such a joy to do. But it is an issue for repertoire. You think, well, do you have the stamina for that? Do you have the range for that aria? Does it sound right in your voice? Because people bring along something like Prince Gremin's aria from Onegin, which is glorious and
Hmm.
lovely, and it's not going to hurt the voice. but it's for a guy who's seen a bit of life. And
He's an older man talking about the
yeah,
pleasures of his marriage.
yeah, absolutely. So, and everybody wants to do Il Lacerto Spirito from
Hmm.
Boccanegra. Well, that's Fiesco's an older guy.
Yep.
And it's so I mean, I hope this is a very long answer to your question. Is of course I'm sorry, but or the situation, but I usually point them towards Handel
Hmm.
to keep the voice, to keep the voice moving, get some character into the voice, or then I would direct them. If I was to relive my career and anything, I would have sung a lot more songs
Hmm.
earlier on in my career because you can have a lot of fun and work on the voice, but not have to sing too loud,
Got
which
it.
is, yeah,
I have a very dear friend who's a bass
yeah,
who is older than you are,
mm,
and his voice is in splendid shape.
yeah,
And he said, I could still sing Don Giovanni or Leporello or the Count or Figaro. He
yeah.
said, I have all the notes, but I don't have the knees.
Yeah, I get
And,
that.
these
Yeah,
are very physical roles.
yeah, really. Yeah,
Figaro is, on the floor measuring a bed at the start of the opera, and he's making escapes, and Leporello is always escaping.
yeah,
And my friend is, he's a great, great singer. I know you know who
mm,
that is,
yeah,
but he's stopped singing those roles because
yeah,
he is older,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he wants to be persuasive and convincing. He can still
mm,
sing all the big bass roles that you also do.
yeah,
He's more in the Italian French than in the German, though he does
yeah,
do some German.
mm,
Um, but I noticed one of the roles that you sing perhaps,
mm,
is Claudio from Agrippina by
yeah,
Handel. And
yeah,
I happen to love Agrippina. I just think it's a
yeah,
terrific opera.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Claudio it's a good role.
It's a lovely role. He's a great buffoon.
Yeah.
This it's great fun to do. I mean, it's Handel, which means, and it's a wonderful role to do because it really moves up the voice really high and very, very low.
Hmm.
But it's a lovely role to do because actually with Handel bass roles, they're a bit hit and miss. Some of them are very dull, and some of them, a bit minor key and just
Yeah.
you're singing along with the continuo. But that one is fun.
Hmm. It's a very dramatic role, but it's also a very funny role.
Yeah,
That
very.
opera is amazing because it's about very serious things, but it's also very comedic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's good fun and it's great. It's just wonderful arias. I mean, they're just beautifully written. Oh,
Um,
yeah,
I remember when I worked at the Met, I worked on the Otto Schenk Ring when it was new.
yeah,
And one of the basses who I really came to
mm,
adore was Matty Salminen.
yeah,
And he did Hagen and he did various
mm,
roles.
yeah,
And his voice was described to me as a black bass.
yeah, yeah,
What is the black bass?
yeah. The term the Germans, it's the Schwarzebass in Germany. They talk a lot about when I go there. Oh, you shouldn't be singing. You're a Schwarzebass, yeah. And what they mean is, yeah, a black color to the voice, which means
Hmm.
you can do those kind of those bad guys, but it also the color of the voice. And they thing is, they said it can be misleading because they said that Gottlob Frick was the Schwarze Bass,
Hmm.
but it does. It's not to do with the timbre of the voice so much because Gottlob Frick had a very bright voice.
Yeah.
He had a lot. He could do the dark sound as well, but he had a lot of what I would call ping or blade on the voice and a very Germanic technique, which was all very much in the e position.
Hmm.
But he was called a Schwarzer Bass, and I wish somebody would explain to me better what that means. I mean, because people say that to me. If I sing Fafner, if I sing Claggett, if I sing Hunding, they say, "Oh yeah, it's great because you're a black bass, you're a Schwarzer Bass."
Hmm.
Um, and likewise, actually, Matty, despite the fact that he sang, you know, all those roles,
Yeah.
Hagen, Hunding, those roles. When you when he sings, when you hear him sing, live, and the voice has got an incredibly bright edge to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily to do with just this like kind of sound that you with Matty. I always feels like it's this kind of seismic event when he sings. You can register it on some Richter scale somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
because it has this tremendous kind of body in the sound, but it also has this carrying quality which goes this way and can cut through anything, which is the secrets, really. We could talk a bit more about that in bass voices too, because that fascinates me, that whole thing.
Me as well. I'm going to introduce another name because one of my favorite productions that I worked on at the Met was Chovanshina by
Yes.
Mussorgsky, and we
Yeah.
had both Marty Talvela and Matti
Yeah.
Salminen.
Wow.
And,
Right.
but two very tall Finns with these
Yeah.
magnificent voices,
Yeah.
but different sounds.
Yeah, totally.
And that's what struck me, is that you would think that Marty Talvela had the black bass until you heard Matti Salminen.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
when we did Chovanshina, one of them was Dossi Fay, the priest, and the other was Chovanshi, who was sort of the Donald Trump character, let's call him.
So I'm guessing that Talvela sang Dossi Fay, I'm guessing.
Yes, he did. Yeah. And, I had never known that opera before, and I love when I get to work on a classic work. Fantastic. It's now one of my very favorite operas.
Yeah. I've been asked to do it twice. I've been asked to do it. I've just been asked to do it again in a few years' time. I can't do it because Dossi Fay is the role that I really, really always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because I love singing Pimen, and I love singing Gornamans. It's like those two mixed together, but longer. And much more. I say long. It's not longer than Gornamans, but it's certainly longer than Pimen. But that kind of the journey to the role, and also the way it sits and the voice, I just can't wait to do it. But sadly, I've never done it yet. So,
well, we're putting this out into the universe if you want to do that.
Please.
I often, when I teach opera work in productions, I like to do operas in repertory that seem to influence one another. The most famous example, and you see this all the time, is Rosenkavalier and Le Nozze di Figaro.
Yeah.
But there are many others that are less so. And one of them for me is Chovanshina and Lohengrin.
Yeah. Because
you have in both operas what I call the old believers.
Yeah.
And Ortrud and Telramund. That his name, Telramund? Yeah. And then there's Dossi Fay and Marfa, who is a great role of the woman, the contralto or mezzo soprano. And then you have the new generation, the new believers. And both operas are fundamentally about belief. One of them is more Western Christian Catholic. The other is more Russian Orthodox.
Yeah.
But they're both about the extent that people will go to hold to their beliefs.
Yeah.
And, without underlining too much our modern world, we see this almost every day, where people will adopt positions and stick to them because of what I call old beliefs.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that old beliefs are necessarily bad, but I think they bear examination in the modern world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what these operas can do for us.
Yeah.
What operas would you want to do that have that weight? I mean, The Ring always does.
The Ring always does. I mean, I for me, I have to say my top, I will say at the moment, my top Wagner is Parsifal at the moment. It's the role that I think when I did it I did it the first time a few years ago, and I felt when I was doing it, I felt like the role that I always wanted to do and felt always I always should have done. But it isn't just because of me and the role and the Gornamans and everything like that, but it was because of the effect that it has on the room, opera house, concert hall, rehearsal room, orchestral rehearsal room. There's the effect that it has and what it says to us. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about Parsifal. I'm sorry, I'm going maybe off tangent.
So you're breaking up just a little bit. I'm going to ask you to restart and say there's a lot of stuff about Parsifal.
Okay, yeah, you're getting a bit flaky too. There's a lot of things written about Parsifal and the people read and say that is just, it's just confusing, gets in the way, but you cannot deny the effect that that piece has on the room that you're in. Be it the theatre, the concert hall, the rehearsal room, even. There's something about that piece and what it says about humanity, about suffering, about redemption, about forgiveness, about those kind of themes, which we need just as much today as when it was written. That for me is my kind of go-to piece for the effect it has on the audience. Also Tristan as well. And Wagner was just the master at creating something in the room. I mean, dear Lord above.
I think I'm not the first person to say that it took me a while to get Parsifal into me and me into Parsifal.
Yeah.
Because, as so often happens, it's the first production you see. I saw the first production for me of Parsifal when I was 19, and I was studying in Berlin, and the Deutsche Oper of West Berlin, because it was divided then, I had one of these strange productions that had a green light bulb, and that was it. And whoever was singing, whether it was Amfortas or Kundry or Parsifal, would stand under the green light bulb and then step out from the green light. And I had no idea what was going on. It was 5 or 6 hours, and the music was very new to me. And I wouldn't say alien because I did like Wagner, but I just didn't understand anything, and I wasn't prepared. Now, of course, with many productions and studying, I get it. But when I've spoken to men who have sung Gurnemanz, they have a special feeling for that role because number one, is a very long role, but number two, he's sort of the intermediary between the world of the opera and the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. Yeah.
And when you play him, do you sense that you are in effect admitting the audience to that special world?
Absolutely. Of the roles I've done so far, there are probably 2 or 3 that when I'm doing it, I I can feel the hairs on my arms and on the, not on my head, of course, but on my head, that I know that there's something incredible about that space at that time is happening in the room. It's very hard, but I do, as much as I when I'm doing it, I do that intermediate. Yes, I relate. I'm speaking to whoever I speak to on stage, but really, quite a lot of his monologues are in on himself, about things he's seen, things he's felt and heard, and what he did. And so you're in this world, and you have to bring them into your world. Which once you've got that, I think it takes a little while for them to establish who you are, what you're going to do. God, he's saying a lot. Once you've built that relationship with the audience and they're listening, then you can play around with it. It's like they're in here, and you can sort of take them this way, take them that way. If you know the text and you can tell the story and you can sing it, then there's a lot you can do with that role. And that's what you said then is precisely why I love that role, is because you are the intermediary between what's going on here and your lives and out in this world and in this room. And that's, he is the conduit through which all that happens, which is why it's a thrilling role to sing. Not only is it wonderfully written for a bass, but and it's incredibly lyrical to sing, but it has everything in it. And at the end, I remember Robert Lloyd saying to me years ago, before I even considered him singing any Wagner, he said, when you do Gurnemanz at the end of the night, you feel spent. You've given of the best of you for, well, over the span. The role is only about an hour only, and only an hour and 40 minutes singing. But over the 5 hours or 4.5 hours, at the end of it, you really feel like you've done a night's work. And it's not just to do with the amount of singing you do. It's because you've given everything of yourself. And it's not about showing off your voice. It's that's another conversation we can have about Italian repertoire against German repertoire.
Well, I won't say against, but because I live in both worlds. But I want to mention something that I know you know well, but I want to mention it to our audience, which is a worldwide audience, by the way. That Wagner wrote this opera, Parsifal, with a specific space in mind, the Festspielhaus in Bayreuth.
Yeah.
And while he was intending to present the Ring Cycle there, and eventually other works were presented there by his wife Cosima, it
Mm.
was purpose built for Parsifal.
Yeah.
And the particular acoustics of that room, that
Mm.
space,
Yeah.
is what he composed for. And when James Levine, with whom I worked for many years, was doing his recording of Parsifal, and he conducted
Yeah.
it in Bayreuth as well,
Mm.
he chose to have his recordings sound like the Festspiel House. In other words, not a studio recording of
Mm.
Parsifal like everyone else's, or perhaps
Yeah.
captured live in a
Yeah.
theater in Salzburg or Vienna or
Mm.
Berlin or New York,
Mm.
but rather what Wagner wanted it to sound like. So when you hear James Levine's recording of Parsifal, I'm not saying better or worse, but it sounds different from all the
Yeah.
others,
Yeah.
specifically because he intended to have it have that sound.
Right.
Have you ever heard
Yeah.
that recording?
I not entirety. I
Yeah,
listened to Act One
yeah.
when I was starting to learn it. I thought, let's listen to how the guys who did it well do it. You know what I mean? You do a recce. As a singer, you
Yeah.
say, oh, I like to take a bit of that. I like to take a bit of Kutmall, a bit of Frick, a little bit of Hotter, those kind of things.
Hmm.
But that, you're right. Act One, the only one it did sound different to the other
Yeah.
recordings. Yeah,
I'm sure it's on iDodge. You haven't checked, but I'm sure I'm
yeah,
sure we have
yeah,
it.
it does.
Um, Now, you being British, I'm going to ask you before we go down the British road. Tell me about Lancashire.
Oh, oh, where can you say? I mean, it's where, despite the fact that I've lived in the south of England now, around London for nearly 40 years now, you can't really get it out of your system, the fact that you're a northerner. I mean,
Mhm.
even though in terms of the UK, Lancashire is not in the far north, but anybody north of sort of Birmingham is definitely a northern for the UK people. Even though it's 180 miles, it's
Yeah.
nothing for the Americans. It's nothing for the Americans. Um, but Lancashire, the language people. What I miss about not being in Lancashire anymore, and what I love about when I go up there to visit, or if I go up to work, not so much these days, is everybody calls me love. It's a kind of, hey, all right, love. This is anywhere. This is in the shoe shop. This is in
Yeah.
the pharmacy. This is in the restaurants. All right, love. All right, love. And if you know Ian McKellen,
Hmm.
actually, he's from Manchester,
Yeah.
very close to where I'm from, and he said, I
Where are
love the
you
fact
from precisely?
I'm from a little town called Cadis Head. No,
How do
you
you
wouldn't
spell it?
ever. It's Cadis Head, all
Head.
one word, and it's about 10 miles southwest of the city centre.
Hmm.
And it was when I was growing up, it was based. The population was made of people who worked in the factories that were in the town. It was a
Yeah.
very industrial town. There was a big steel works. There was an ink factory. There was a margarine factory, and there was
Uh,
a tar works.
oh boy.
So, yeah, it wasn't. I would say that it wasn't a great environment, probably for my health
No.
or anybody's health at the time. But I'm still here, even though my house has fallen out. I uh, but everybody, and I grew up in an area where my larger family, not just our nuclear family, but our larger family, we lived within a square mile. So you're going around to your Auntie Grace's for tea. Oh, okay, fine.
Mhm.
You're going to Auntie Eva's for lunch on Sunday. Oh, okay, fine. That was part of it, and it was a very economically a very poor area.
Mhm.
My parents were in what we call a council house in the UK,
Yeah.
which means they rented it from the council.
Yeah.
But it didn't
In
feel
America, that's called public housing.
okay. Fine,
Yeah.
okay. And but we were not destitute by any means, but things were pretty tight. My dad was a truck driver for a roadworks company, and my mum worked as a secretary in a place in Manchester. So there wasn't a lot of spare cash, and
Mhm.
certainly not to throw my way. We were all encouraged to get jobs to pay our own way as soon as we could.
Mhm.
But
Glenda
Lancashire,
Jackson.
you know,
Glenda
sorry,
Jackson was from around there, correct?
yes,
Glenda
she is.
Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah, she is. And there's a lot of opera singers from that area, my great friend John Tomlinson, Alice Coote, we're
Hmm.
all from the same, Amanda Rucroft, we're all in the very
Yeah.
similar area to each other.
I'm just
Um,
going to put this out there. Alice is a wonderful person,
oh, yeah, yeah,
and we share a birthday so that we always communicate on our birthday. But she's just really wonderful, and her wonderfulness she brings to the stage,
yeah.
and her
So,
artistry, and
yeah, she is. She's the heart on the. Everything is out there.
yeah,
We say here, you put your heart on your sleeve.
right,
That's Alice.
yeah.
What she's feeling, you get out there. But every performance she does, if you're doing a run of operas, it's completely different,
Hmm.
and it can be slightly unnerving as a colleague because she'll suddenly. We did a production just before Christmas. She would just suddenly. I had to hold her back. I had to restrain her from going something. But some nights she wouldn't tell me what she was going to do, and she would suddenly dash off and shoot off. And I literally had to grab her by the coattails because she said, "If you don't stop me, I'm going to go." And she wouldn't fake it. So I was terrified. So where's she going to go tonight?
What
um,
opera was that?
we'd staged at the Royal Opera House. They staged Jephthah,
Aha.
Handel, and we and we haven't done an opera together. Ooh, gosh, for a long time, actually. We've done lots of concerts together, but not operas. And it was just lovely to spend 6 weeks rehearsing with Alice. We had a
Hmm.
great time. We had a good time.
I know she recently undertook Les Troyens,
Yes.
which is on my short list of very favorite operas. You've sung in
Oh,
it.
I have, yeah.
Um, and it's just a perfect opera for her.
Perfect.
But
Yeah.
anyway, now that you're explaining, let's call them Northern or Lancashire people, I
Yeah.
get it more.
Yeah.
Although I have many dear friends from there, including a classmate I went to school with, um, I've not been to Manchester or Lancashire. I've been
Oh,
to other parts of the UK, but I've
yeah.
not been to Birmingham and I've not been to Manchester.
Oh, and they both have now. They have the two best concert halls in the UK,
I know that.
which is we in London. It's not so great. Manchester, we all thought Birmingham. Well, actually, I still kind of quite prefer Birmingham to sing in. We thought that Birmingham was just the best acoustic I've ever sung in my life. And then Manchester came up, and I thought it's different, but it's
Hmm.
still wonderful because
Yeah.
you can do whatever you like. If your voice can carry and project normally, you can do that. You don't need to add all this to it. It just goes, and they're wonderful halls. Wow.
Hmm.
And culturally, when I was growing up in Manchester, it was really there was still a lot of World War II bomb damage. It
Yeah,
was very dark and dirty. Now it's transformed.
I
Nice.
know. My good friend is the conductor John Andre Nozeda, and he
Yeah.
early in his career had a long stint at the BBC Symphony in Manchester
Yeah.
and
Mm.
loved it very much. So I do have to get there. So
Yes.
since we're now in on British soil, I wanted to talk to you about a composer whose works you excel in, namely Benjamin Britten,
Yeah.
um, whose work I don't know if you know about Britten's time in New York. Do you know about that?
What during World War II?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just before, actually, he and his partner, Peter
Yeah.
Pears, lived in a particular house in Brooklyn that was known as the February House.
No, I didn't know
And
that.
it was owned by the Ecclesiast, which is to say, stripper,
Yeah.
Gypsy Rose Lee, who made a lot of money. And
Yeah.
there were writers in the house and composers. And it was sort of a little artist colony in Brooklyn
Yeah.
in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears found work in New York, and they were more accepted here because they were gay. The
Yeah.
UK had laws that we didn't officially have. There was prejudice,
Mm.
of course,
Yeah.
but not prohibitions. And they were pacifists
Yeah.
and were against the idea of World War II, as who would not be, who's sane. But I remember talking to Peter Pears and getting his explanation from this, that they said that even though we were pacifist, we had to support Britain in the war effort. And what they
Yeah.
did was they got on a ship and they sailed a Canadian ship, and they sailed sort of the North Atlantic. And I forget if they wound up in Liverpool or Belfast, but it was one of those ports,
Yeah.
and then found their way down to the more besieged part of the United Kingdom. And they were working on Peter Grimes,
Wow.
and they were doing performances and for the war effort, and singing in bombed out spaces and playing in bombed out spaces, Benji and the Peter Pears. And with that, as Peter Pears told me, they reabsorbed their sense of the best part of Great Britain.
Yeah.
And part of that is expressed I say part of it in the opera of Peter Grimes.
Yeah.
Um, I have seen your wonderful performance as John Claggart
Yeah.
in Billy Budd, which is a magnificent opera, but I've not seen it in Aldeborough. Is it pronounced Aldeborough,
Yeah.
Aldeburgh,
Yeah.
Aldeborough?
Yeah.
Talk about Aldeborough, where I have yet to get to, and I've always
Oh,
wanted to go there.
well, I can talk to it as somebody. Sorry, I'm just going to move over here. I'm going to talk. I can talk to you as somebody who, despite it being there, and despite my job, I went for the first time 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were performing Billy Budd in Snape Maltings, which is the main concert hall there. And
Explain a little more. I know what it is. Explain to our audience more what that is.
Snape Maltings.
Yeah.
Okay, so think of a huge barn of a place that was used to store grain, and is now the main concert hall of it's called Snape Maltings. All the buildings there were really to do with all that was to do with grain back in the day, and then it was developed. This whole area was developed by Britain and the Britain Foundation, and that's where they lived, because they lived in the Red House. I think they lived somewhere else before that, but they lived in the Red House adjacent to this, and that's where a lot of the operas, like Albert Herring, Peter Grimes, they were written to do with the people of that area or to do with the sea. And even the parables were written for the churches in the Suffolk area, the county. So it's actually the kind of eastern part of, if you look at the UK, there's a sort of eastern flank of
East
that area.
Anglia. Yeah.
East Anglia. And and today they have the Britain Pierce Foundation, and they have concerts pretty much the year round, recitals, masterclasses, and they put an opera as well. But I discovered when we were going up there that Billy Budd had never ever been performed at Snape before. So it was a huge landmark event, and also it's a little bit, the opera is quite a big opera to put on it, but we did it in a semi-stage concert. We had a small area at the front where we could act and do stuff, but the orchestra was behind us, and then the choir were behind them. But I have to say, the acoustic, that place is just fantastic. I don't think I've ever enjoyed singing somewhere as much as that. But it's a very special place. Just to be there and do that piece was great. But there many of my colleagues who really do much more recital work than I've done, they go there quite a lot. They would know a lot about that place. I never did.
And I mean, so much of Benjamin Britten is about the evocation of the sea and the moods of the changing sounds of water, but also the light or the fog, the weather that goes with the sea. And, here, and not only here, recently Bradley Cooper came out with this film Maestro about Leonard Bernstein. And what's often forgotten, of course, Bernstein knew Benjamin Britten very well, is that the last concert Bernstein did, it was the Sea Pictures from Peter Grimes, and it was Beethoven's Seventh Symphony.
Was it really? I didn't know that.
And so when he decided, there's a recording I have an Adagio, that you can hear that Bernstein was very ill. And he got through the Sea Pictures, he got through the first two movements of the Beethoven, but then required assistance, oxygen. This was done at Tanglewood, and somehow he managed to get through with the Boston Symphony, which was his first orchestra. knew what to do and how to play. And it was a completely transforming event because people sort of knew that this was it for Lenny.
Really.
And,
Huh.
he had conducted famously the LSO and the Mahler Second and
Mm.
had a lot of glorious innings, not only in New York, but in the UK and Vienna and
Yeah.
Amsterdam and Milan.
Yeah.
Um, but I always, when I think about composers, I studied with Lenny, I studied with Claudio Batto. Claudio Batto's last composer that he was studying when he was dying was Schumann.
Really.
And, not that there's an answer, but I always wonder why a Claudio Batto would pick Schumann necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with Schumann, but at
No.
all.
Yeah.
But
No.
it's an interesting choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Didn't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
And apparently Lenny near the end was also studying Schumann.
Was he really?
Yeah.
God.
Not at the very end, apparently Mahler and a couple of others, but
Yeah.
Schumann as well.
Good grief. No. Didn't know.
So
Right.
since we're talking Schumann, do you sing any of his songs?
No, I
No.
don't. And that's me. You might want to talk about my journey in recital songs.
Let's talk about that.
Do you want to do that? Because
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
because because of the trajectory. The trajectory sounds very, very exciting because of the late start to my career, um, and sometimes it doesn't feel like a trajectory. Um,
Hmm.
um, uh, I because I came to opera singing very late. I was in choirs really for 13, 14 years,
Hmm.
singing professionally. And then I had to make ends meet and see if I could be a soloist at all and think, are they going to have to do some opera and get on the stage?
Hmm.
So I pretty much, I mean, if it's of any interest to somebody, I sang to an agent.
Hmm.
And he said to me, yeah, your voice is in good shape, really, but a bit rusty, and you have no opera on your biography whatsoever.
Mm.
You need to get some coaching, come back in 6 months, let's do it again. So I did. I came back, got some coaching, and he said, okay, I'll get you some auditions and let's see how we go. But I wouldn't recommend leaving the group, the security of the BBC Singers, if I were you. It's
Hmm.
really tough out there. Blah blah. I had a young family.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got me some auditions and we got going. Well, that was for opera, and I was then trying to make. I still did concerts. I did a lot of concert oratorios, Matthew Passion, St. John Passion's Messiahs. I did all those, but mainly I was trying to be an opera singer, and I loved being on stage.
Hmm.
Absolutely loved it. But I therefore missed out on leader repertoire,
Yeah.
song repertoire. And then I once, I made my living as an opera singer primarily. I'd never done a recital for 20 something years or something more. And
Mm.
then Julius Drake said to me 5 years ago, he came to a performance of Rheingold, I think, and said, Bryn, Alice Coote has been telling me that you really should sing some leader. And he said, I think you should sing some leader. Let's come to my house. We'll go through some stuff. I said, well, that'll be interesting because I don't really know any stuff. So we did. We spent 3 hours in his music room bashing through everything that he thought might suit me that I might like.
Hmm.
Anyway, we got a kind of a program together. We cotched and botched stuff together. And then lockdown came and whatever. And then we did two recitals. He got me two recitals. One was in the Oxford Leader Festival, and the second one was in the Temple Music, which is in the central London. And I learned these programs. I worked very hard. We practiced a lot. And I was terrified because if you're in an opera, people are coming to see the opera, they're coming to the theatre, they're coming to see the soprano or the tenor or the baritone, but not necessarily you. Whereas if you've got a recital with your name on a poster outside with you on it, they kind of, well, is anybody going to turn up? Because I'm not known as a song singer. But the places were full, absolutely heaving full of people, and I absolutely loved it. Completely loved it. And I had to
Hmm.
I found some different colors in my voice that I'd never really had to do before, to sing a little softer, to play around with the text more and find different colors. And then we started to do some recitals. And so it's been I'm now 61. And I did my first proper recital at the age of 59, which is late. But we made a recording actually. I'm going to plug it now, aren't I? Of course, the recording which comes out on April 26th, called "Fear No More," which is Julius Drake and I singing songs from Mussorgsky songs of Dance to Death and some Lieder and Schubert Lieder for bass. And songs. When you asked me if I was singing, yes, no, but I really love to.
So
Opened up a whole new door.
I was going to say your image froze slightly, but your voice did not. So we're going to keep going through.
Okay.
I remember that when I first met Marty Talvala, that he was in Boris Godunov and Bernd Weichel was at the Met in Tannhäuser. Yeah. And Bernd Weichel is a tall man. Marty Talvala is a very tall man, was a very tall man. And I remember that Marty Talvala put his hand down on Bernd Weichel's shoulders, and Bernd Weichel is 2 heads taller than I am, and said, "Bernd, you must come to Finland and sing Lieder. If you don't sing Lieder, you're not an opera singer." And that always struck me because that was Marty Talvala, the voice of God. And he also incorporated that in his program. Now, I just sort of a Marty Talvala role that I could imagine you're doing, and maybe you've done it, but maybe not. Os Min in the Entführung aus dem Sarai.
Yeah, I was asked to do it 4 years ago, couldn't do it. I've just been asked to do it again in 3 years' time. So that would be my first.
I don't know you that well, but I think you'd be a natural for that role.
Yeah, it's great. It's one of those that I've been. I'm surprised that I've not been asked to do it more often, because I like moving my voice around and I have the low notes and I can go up, and so and I love having fun, because I again that was a voyage of discovery when I did Ox for the first time. It was a kind of, I didn't think I'd enjoy this, but I absolutely love it. And Os Min, precisely for the same reason. I think I've been asked. I think I'm doing 2. In Germany, of course, in a high level, so my German will have to be polished as well. And I've sung the arias, bizarrely. I've sung the arias in a gala, and I thought it would be so good to do the whole role.
Yeah. When you built your interpretation of Baron Ochs and Rosenkavalier, what did you base it on, if anything?
Well, I wanted to do it in a way, because again, it was thing that's come across this a lot. I'm trying to, it's the fact that you'll say, "Oh, I'm doing such and such a role," and a lot of the time people say, "Yes, that's a good fit. Oh, you'll be amazing as that." There are 2 roles that when I did it, when I said, "Oh, I'm going to do this role," raised some eyebrows, because people had thought of me having quite a good sound, bel canto kind of spinny, voice, basso cantante, even in the early days, and they say you sing beautifully. So therefore, why are you singing Baron Ochs, and why are you singing John Claggart in Billy Budd?
Well, I know why anyone would want to sing John Claggart. It's a great role.
Yeah. But I said, look, these are roles I've really always wanted to do. And when it came to Baron Ochs, I knew that I had to do in a way that I can sing it. If I started to bark it, I listened to some recordings and I did, but most of the great Ochs over the years who did it, they had really lovely voices. I mean, stunningly beautiful legato, and they were famous for their Gunnamanses and maybe for their Marke and Zarastros and things like that. They could really sing and join a line together. I thought, now if I can do it like that, I'll enjoy it. And it would, and that was my goal with those. And I didn't want to play him as just a filthy old, questionable character. I wanted, like most of the things I do, I'm not very good at. No, I'm not saying I'm not good at acting. It's not to do with that. It's that I have to have something. I have to identify with something in the character.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to play him as really old, even though I am, old. I wanted to play him someone with a lot of energy and a lot of life. He just emits joy.
Yeah.
everything about him, he is terribly annoying to everybody and drives everybody crazy. The only time he's not was at the end of Act Two when he's lamenting how
Hmm.
bad things are. But
Having
even
been
then,
pinked. I love the verb that's used, that he's been pinked.
yeah, he has.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
that's very good. I and I just feel that everything about him is just bursting with this confidence and this.
Yeah.
It may be based on nothing at all, but it would all collapse. But that's how I do it. If he's got that much ebullience about him,
Hmm.
that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to sing it beautifully because he would be proud of singing beautifully. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I didn't want to just make him somebody who can just hack his way through it.
So here my theory about that character. I love reading the letters of composers, and there's a wonderful correspondence between Giuseppe Verdi and Richard Strauss
Yeah,
that happened sort of in the last decade of the 19th century.
yeah,
And Verdi, among his many virtues, was very good about his money. He gave a lot of it away, unlike Wagner, but he also knew how to make and keep money, and he
yeah,
knew how to collect royalties and so on. Richard Strauss similarly was interested in that and helped set up organizations in the German-speaking world that made sure that composers got their royalties and were properly paid. And their
yeah.
correspondence was about that primarily, but
Mm,
also about the fact that Strauss was very admiring of Verdi's new last opera, Falstaff.
yeah,
And I always think that that expression by Strauss of his love for Falstaff, that
yeah,
somehow that character got channeled into Baron Ox.
yeah,
So when you talk about the ebullient,
yeah,
that he could be a bit of a rascal, but he's an
yeah,
adorable rascal rather
yeah,
than a dirty old man,
yeah,
that it's Richard Strauss's Falstaff. Plus, um, Hofmannsthal was so precise in
mm,
his libretto about where these different characters were from in terms of their social classes,
yeah,
in terms of the kind of German or Austrian German they spoke. And Baron Ox is from Steiermark, from Styria. And
yes,
these are sort of the country bumpkins, Leopold
yeah,
Vergegen,
mm,
in which they eat hearty food. It's not necessarily the most refined food in Austria, which
no,
is wonderful food,
yeah,
but it's very good, good
yeah,
food. And the wines of Styria are robust.
mm,
And at a certain point in the opera, they talk about Tokai, and
mm,
he knows his wines. He's not a lush, but he really knows his wine, and he knows his food, and
yes,
he savors the food the way Falstaff savors his sack,
yeah,
his sherry. Um, Baron Knox really knows his wine,
yeah,
and if you were to tackle him on that topic, he would be very sophisticated.
yeah,
And in the fine courts of Vienna where they're drinking coffee and chocolate and so on,
yeah,
that's not his thing.
no,
But when he arrives with his retinue of country bumpkins,
yeah,
a lot of them are drunk,
yeah,
but it's not just about getting drunk. It's about that they've imbibed and they've enjoyed themselves.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I think I could say one thing from a performing point of view. No matter how tired, I remember doing it at Glyndebourne, and I was also at the time. I think I was doing a double. I was also singing Arkel in Pelléas et Mélisande,
A
and
very happy guy.
I know, and initially they said, "Oh, don't worry, it'll work very well. Don't worry, we'll make it work." And Robin Ticciati and I were both in both pieces.
Hmm.
And Robin said, and I said, I can't do both these roles. I just can't do it. That's so different. And I'm going to get. And they said, no, we'll make it work. Well, actually, when the schedules came out, they were like this.
Yeah.
And we did maybe 14 Rosencavaliers and 10
Oh,
Pelléas. And that shows, so I never really got enough time to get really rest. Ox is a pretty exhausting night.
yeah.
And I could have just needed 1 or 2 days to recover. And I never really got much of that. But do you know what? When I turned up to do Rosencavalier, as soon as you're in your dressing room and you're getting your wig on and everything, and it you would suddenly say, oh no, this is going to be great. It was a kind of, there are some pieces like that give you an energy that you think, no, I want to do this. I always feel like the beginning of the Overture of Figaro. It just said,
Mhm.
once that starts, you think, yeah, this is going to be a good night. It's funny, isn't it? It gives you,
So now that you mention operas that we find draining or not, there's
yeah,
a particular opera that you sang at the Met that I find incredibly draining, and
yeah,
you were not the lead. It's Puccini's Manon Lescaut.
yeah.
I find the most exhausting opera as an audience
It,
member, and
it
having
is.
worked that show, I mean, yes, it's a wonderful role for soprano and a very good role for tenor,
Yeah,
but it's exhausting.
yeah, it
It
is.
drags. It's four acts, and he didn't design it in such a way that,
No.
I mean, in the first Met production I worked on, we had three intervals, three intermissions, and it was torture.
Oh, good grief. That's a
Yeah,
over 4 hour evening, isn't it?
yeah, and we
Four.
had Domingo and Renato Scotto, and they were terrific,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
we were all so dragged out by the end. And I thought, well, this is just Manon
mm,
Lescaut.
yeah, I
And,
know.
somehow
Mm.
Parsifal eventually didn't feel as long to me. And
Yeah.
Götterdammerung to me flies by. And Tannhäuser flies by. But Manon Lescaut was torture.
Yeah, yeah. I agree.
Yeah,
I think it's just one act too much, to be honest.
yeah.
I felt, and you're aware that the tenor is having a tough night. In fact, they
Hmm.
both are in Act Three. They're having a tough time, and you think, "Good Lord, we got to Act Four. Thank goodness for that." There are some operas where you think, "Oh, you know," but funny enough, I don't feel that. I don't feel like I always said that doing Gornaments, it's a lot shorter when you're doing it than it is when you're watching it.
Yeah.
But there are that now you've opened my memory to that. At the time, thinking, oh gosh, I mean, I'm gone as well by then. I mean, Puccini didn't write good bass rolls. We all know that, really.
Hmm.
But I remember that now, thinking, oh Lord, these guys are really having to earn their fee. You
Yeah.
know.
I'm thinking of Puccini bass rolls. There's Timur.
Yeah, yeah, that's a nice thing. Okay,
Yeah,
prove me wrong. That's a
in
nice little
Turandot.
scene. That's a
Yeah,
nice aria.
yeah.
You Sorgi. That's nice. Yeah, that's
Sorgi,
good.
Sorgi.
Yeah. So,
And
but yeah, and
but it's impossible. I
Collini is
mean,
one of those young bass rolls. Collini is one of the you say you sing Collini. You'll be doing that for another 15 years. Learn that.
right. The Vecchia Zimata.
Yes,
Um, how much what we call bel canto have you done?
I've done some. I used to do quite a bit. I did a lot of recording for Opera Rara
Hmm.
years ago, and I did. I used to enjoy doing it a lot because my voice sounded a little bit higher and more lyrical and spinny when I was younger, and then I did some. The last one I did was Oroveso
Yeah,
in
Norma. I was going to ask you
in
whether that one. Yeah,
yeah, I did, but I didn't enjoy it. I have to be honest now. I didn't enjoy it. I found the whole thing, and Tony kept saying, "You okay?" It's
Tony
Papano.
Papano.
Tony Papano kept saying, "Are you
Yeah,
okay?" I said, "Nah, I'm not. I'm not happy." He said, "Come on, let's go and work it in my room." We work it in his room, and I say we managed to get the kind of hang of it, but it just my voice had got. I'd started doing Claggett. I'd started doing some Wagner, and the voice had got really good at singing very strongly in that, but in a different way. But to suddenly have this kind of kind of stuff, I found it so difficult. Having said that, because he kept saying to me, "No, you'll be fine. No, you'll be okay. You'll be okay." He was great. Actually, he was wonderful. And then, but it wasn't until about performance three that I found the kind of right gear for him. And then it was
hmm,
okay, but it made me think. As much as I think it's really healthy, some of those roles they just sit too high for me. The
yeah.
tessitura is just too high.
I asked because Wagner, who gave no credit to anyone, did actually give credit to Bellini,
Yeah,
and
yeah. But the thing
said
is,
that he was.
when I sing Marker or if I sing Gornaments, the comment from B for people is it's good because you sing it lyrically in a bel canto way, which is it's the only way my voice operates. I can't sing in a Germanic way. I don't. People say Germanic, a very stiff way. Of course, that's not very nice to be. That's not very nice. but the with the attack and the onset of the Italian music is very different. And if I sing in that way, I can sing it all night. I'm fine. At the end of it, at Gornamance, I feel fine. And I think part of it is just to do with this kind of still singing in this bel canto way,
Would you
of spinning
describe that
the
more?
voice spinning. Sorry.
Because I know, for example, you've sung Fiesco and Simone
Yeah,
Boccanegra, one of my
yeah,
favorite operas.
yeah,
You've sung Ramfis and Aida. You've sung
yeah,
some Italian, The King in Don
yeah,
Carlo.
yeah.
Have you ever sung The Grand Inquisitor in Don Carlo?
No, never done it.
No.
No. Now I could
Um,
do it now. I could do it now. But no, never done it.
because I've known Sam Raimi, Ferruccio Furlanetto, the various basses who've
Mm.
sung both, and James Morris, both
Yeah, yeah,
roles
yeah,
with great effect.
yeah,
But I asked you about that because I'd love for you to explain more. Pretend I'm your bass student.
yeah.
What you mean by the Italian attack and how you deploy it in approaching German language music.
Okay, I can. I mean, there'll be people out there who are much more pedagogic than I am. But how I see it is that I do the same way if I'm doing Zarathustra even. Uh, I usually, when I listen to myself, I'm not aware of it when I'm singing it, but if I listen to myself, I'm recording, which is torture usually, but I do it in a way where the breath comes like this. If I can say it as brushing through the voice and spinning the voice like this, it comes a little bit, maybe a tiny little portamento at the beginning of some of the phrases. So rather than a kind of it's not so stiff, I tend to keep it. I'm actually Kurt Moll he
Yeah.
used pretty much the same kind of spin on everything he did as well, because it's keeping that spinning vibrato going. And it's just a little on the onset. It's just a little more gentle one in rather than a kind of
Mm-hmm.
technique. And that's the best way I can come up with now describing it.
Um, we were briefly in the land of Benjamin Britten. I do want to get back to him
Yeah,
because I feel that you have special insights into that world, not only because you're from the UK, but
yeah,
just because many people love his works. A lot of people cannot
yeah.
understand
I know.
Benjamin Britten's musical language, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
and find it very hard.
mm,
It took me time.
yeah.
It took
Okay,
a stint at English National Opera to understand
yeah,
how the language in English worked. They
yeah,
did Gloriana. This is
yes,
years ago.
yeah,
And they were working on this production of Glory. I think Sarah Walker, if I remember, was
yeah,
played Elizabeth the First.
yeah,
Um, and I kind of love Gloriana, and that was my way into um, discovering the Peter Grimeses and the Billy Budds operas I adore now.
yeah.
But I got to work with John Vickers
Wow.
when he did his Peter Grimes, and that was a very different Peter Grimes, say from Philip Langridge and other people. I got
Yeah,
to work with
yeah,
Anthony Dean
yeah,
Griffey, a wonderful Peter
yeah,
Grimes, but all of them very, very different.
yes,
And even though Benjamin Britten, we know, composed on the voice of Peter Pears for his
yes,
tenor roles,
yeah,
but nonetheless, once we have expanded from that, we have a whole world of opera singing. And I
yeah.
don't think that he gets the same due that Verdi, Wagner, Strauss,
No,
Mozart
no.
get. And I think he's owed it. And what do you think?
Uh, oh, definitely. And it breaks my heart. I know it breaks a lot of Brits. Our hearts that you might do Britain to a 50% house. It's not the case when you do it in the UK. We did Billy Budd at the Royal Opera House, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. We did only 5 performances, but you couldn't get a ticket for love nor money.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to reduce the price of the tickets in one sense, but it was still packed out. And when you do, and because there's something It's hard to describe for me because I mean, like Wagner, Britten was a theatre man. He wrote for the words and the text to go bam, 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 sync like that, and to tell the story in a way that I find personally heartbreaking. And it affects us as the deepest level, even if it's not done particularly well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it still affects me. I've adjudicated so many competitions and listened to young baritones having a go at Billy's final aria, and even if it's not really being so great, it still moves me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. There's something about the bleakness that you're talking about being by the sea. There's something about this wild and visceral. Billy Budd, again, is heartbreaking. One of the first production I did, actually, the Glyndebourne one, is that, if you saw, that was where the boat is cut in half.
Mm-hmm.
And Claggett, we have all the decks. You see all the decks of the boat, but there's something about. I mean, Claggett was down in the bottom deck in his area where he rules. I mean, it's creepy as hell. I mean, but it's something that drags you back. Whether you're watching Death in Venice, whether you're watching Grimes, is heartbreaking. But I have to say, as a Brit, it affects us in a different way. I don't know what it is. It feels like it's so much part of our community that we grew up in, you know, with all the sniping and all the bigotry and all the outcast. Who's the scapegoat? If it's Billy, if it's Peter, and these dark themes. It really, I do feel it's woven in with every part of what I do. And I said it earlier, when I do it, if I'm in it, I feel it through my whole. And I'm doing it. Oh, am I allowed to say that? I'm telling you this. I'm doing it in Vienna.
You can say whatever you want.
No, we're doing a production of the Staatsoper in Vienna next year.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Later this year, but no, we can't say that. It's not announced yet. But
no.
And I'm really looking for. I haven't done it actually because lockdown took away a lot of Britain. I think, particularly Billy Budd, for some reason. But it's started to come back now, and I'm so happy. But there's something about, you see, I can picture Aldeburgh Beach, I can picture fish and chip shops, I can picture the mayor and the vicar and those kind of things. Albert Herring
nieces.
Too. Sorry?
The nieces.
The nieces definitely. And if Albert Herring, I picture the village shop. All those things, they're part of our psyche, you know. But they're great. Oh, they're wonderful.
So I was saying to you before that I like to pair operas that may benefit from juxtaposition, such as Lohengrin and Kovanshina. Another one, we were talking about Agrippina, I put that with L'Incoronazione di Poppea. It's the same story. But another one I do, and this may sound odd to you, is Handel's Oratorio of Samson. Not with Sanson, which is too sort of sensual, but with Peter Grimes. And that character, no moon, no stars, total eclipse. And the similar complete aloneness and alienation of Peter is the same as Samson in his dark, blinded world.
Which is interesting. We did it in the proms in the summer. And Alan Clayton sang Samson, I sang Harifa. Very, very similar character in a way, in the fact the giant, the big guy, saying, "Who are you?" You know, and there's the clash. They have this thing where they clash, which is what they do in Billy Budd. Interesting.
So much I want to ask you. I think because I'm a big Ring guy. Actually, there is one that I wanted to ask you about because I know that you can speak to this. What are the BBC choruses?
The BBC singers?
Singers, that's what I meant,
The BBC Singers is a professional chamber choir. When I joined, there were 28 of us. Now they're down to 16 now, with extras. But they are employed by the BBC to perform for radio, record for radio, and also perform live or TV. And they are one of the biggest things that they do, the most important things they do, is to perform new music by new living composers. I mean, they can sing anything. We sang anything. We sing anything you put in front of us. We're all very good at sight reading and just doing it really quickly. there was a big, I'm not sure if you may not, some other people may aware, there was a big hoo-ha last year because the BBC decided they didn't need them anymore. And the backlash,
That's what I'm going after.
the classical music world went, nah,
Yeah.
And we all wrote letters and we wrote, I did an article in the paper and Simon Rattle wrote something and we banded together and I mean, they were saved. And now they've got a profile. When they went to the proms last year, their first appearance at the proms was overwhelming because the people saying this choir is so unique. You can't just get people in to do this. It was great.
I always wonder, I'm a believer as an American in government support of the arts, and we don't have much of that, except in New York City and New York State, where we do believe in that even more. But for example, the city of Berlin, the budget is bigger for art support than the entire United States. But the United Kingdom is somewhere in the middle because of its different governments, but also because there's heritage, there's a recognition of the great orchestras and opera houses and institutions. But on the other hand, there are members of government who say that this money could be better spent doing other things. And I'm not here to be political at all. But I do know that my British artist friends are aggrieved by the fact that they have to start bringing out the tin cup and the petitions and the campaigns in ways that American artists have had to forever because basically we don't have government support of the arts.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm aware of that, because I work in America as well. I'm aware of how that it is. But of course, a lot of us, we work in Europe. Most of the time now, for the next 3 or 4 years, I'm in Germany or in Austria and Vienna. And there, it's a completely different system where it's state funded and everything like that. And we probably compare ourselves more to them than we do to the American model. But it's more than that for us as British artists working over here. It's the fact that we knew it's never been great, but it's now been eroded to the point where we're now, English National Opera is looking decidedly, in a perilous situation, really. Certainly the ENO that we knew, where they put on, multiple new productions a year, some of them great, some of them not so great, but they just threw out this stuff. The tickets were cheaper. You could go casually, straight from work. That kind of edgy, great, gritty opera is going to be lost. And, they have this argument that London can't support 2 opera houses, full-time opera. Well, come on,
London supports 5 orchestras, 7 orchestras, something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
it can support 2 opera houses.
It's just, it's ridiculous. And we're all up in arms about the plight of not only that, but Glyndebourne touring opera, Welsh National Opera, which is a touring opera. The thing that everybody wanted them to do with the Arts Council was to tour, take opera to the masses, to the people who can't hear, so it's not an elitist thing. But then they took away their budget, so they can't tour anymore. I mean, the whole thing is just,
It's worrisome because when these institutions are undone, they can't be rebuilt. And that's why I asked you about the BBC singers, because the BBC is 100 years old, more or less, and is a wonderful news institution, usually, although they make a lot of mistakes about my country. Not big, mistakes. For example, recently they said that Charleston is the capital of South Carolina. It's not. They refer to the House of Representatives as Congress. It's not. Those basic things, because I listen to the BBC every day, that they should know and they don't. But that said, it is a wonderful news institution. It's a wonderful cultural institution. And
it is.
They have orchestras and they have all kinds of musical events. They have the Cardiff Singer of the World. They have the proms. They have all of these things that bring music to more people. Certainly more than any American broadcaster. It's more like, some of the Rundfunk, the German and Austrian orchestra networks that have orchestras. A little bit like the RAI in Italy that used to have several orchestras. Now they have the one in Torino. That's the national orchestra for Italy. But at least they broadcast things.
But
true. I don't want to see the BBC go the way of
No.
other countries, including my own.
Yeah.
NBC used to have Arturo Toscanini conducting the orchestra.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
NBC symphony anymore.
No. No. I mean,
So,
I grew up watching, productions from E&O. They were live on BBC One, BBC Two when you had 3 or 4 channels in the UK in those
mhm,
times. But they would give over to Peter Grimes or Billy Budd
yeah.
and there were programs with Jonathan Miller and Dudley Moore and all these people performing classical music. I mean,
Hmm.
on BBC Two, it was an extraordinary. And that's I think when something starts to rock the boat, we're all harking back to say, "Gosh, you remember what it was like when we had
Yep.
high culture, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
something more than whatever is on a screen." We have to now. What I lament is the fact that when we do an opera now, the way that they think they need to get the crowd in is by doing something that's been on TV or has been a movie or is something that's been on a screen somewhere before. And my passion is that if they put their money into good singers and good directors and produce a quality product, we'll be better than this kind of, I don't know, gimmicky stuff. But I probably shouldn't go down that line because we'll take up too much time.
Well, I'm going to go down a comparable road because you are British, and it's
Yeah,
something I think about a lot because I love the UK. I happened to be working there when the pandemic hit, and I had to get on a flight from London home to New York. But I
did you?
was at the ROH in March of 2020 with
Yes,
Fidelio and different things, and
yeah,
I had to just jump on a plane on March 8th and come right home to New York, and I've not been
mm.
back since.
Yeah,
But um, I've worked with numerous British stage directors.
yeah,
One of my very, very favorites from any country is Fela McDermott.
yes,
I think he's terrific.
yeah,
But I do know British stage directors who direct to the text rather than to the music.
yeah,
And it may be that they don't have the musical preparation or they
yeah,
feel that they're achieving more relevance. Or if there is, let's say it's a Donizetti opera about a queen, a
yes,
British queen, um, they would sort of go into the biography of that British queen
yeah,
rather than the Donizetti music, which is where
yeah,
all the
yeah,
emotional
yeah.
information is.
Mm.
Have you found, if you can generalize, that certain British directors who undertake opera but may not be that musical
Yeah.
direct to the text, and how does that work or not work?
Um, I've known 3 or 4 really great British directors who I work with still regularly. Very, very different styles. Some prepare, 3 or 4 years in advance, and by the time they get to the show, they start the first day of rehearsals. They know every bar, they know every line, they know what they're going to do with each line. They know what the scene is going to look like. What it's, there's that kind of. I'm talking about Richard Jones here,
Hmm.
something like that, or somebody who really feels the music and understands the text, and is David Mavica.
Hmm.
He's incredibly well prepared, and he's the fastest working director I've ever come across in
Yeah.
my life. Um, Deborah Warner. Deborah doesn't come with a great plan. She maybe gives you a chair and a table and says, go. And then you work it out as you go along. You bring what you bring. She says, no, don't do that. Do this. Let's try this. And that's that process. Having said that, she's not musical. She doesn't come up. Comes from a theatre background, as did Richard Jones. But um, she does feel the music, but she goes a lot from the artist. She builds her productions from what the artist brings. Um, uh, I would say I've mentioned Richard Jones before. He would know. Even years later, he came back to look at the Rosenkavalier revival, and he remembered all of the Marschallins texts in Act One.
Hmm.
Oh, when you say this, 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 I thought, God, you haven't done this for 5 years, and you still remember it. But he still, even though he wouldn't have the language to say, I love this phrase, I love this chorus, I love this aria. He doesn't do that, but he will find a way for you to make it shine.
Hmm.
Which is, that's what you want to do. You want to bring this thing from the page out into the open air. And I have known some, I can't mention that. I have known some
No.
British directors who say, what are we going to do with this bit? Can we cut this bit?
Well, I have known many directors, not only British, but many countries, but not Italian, but other countries who have said, let's just cut the overture. Or we have to do a lot of staging during the overture so the audience doesn't get bored.
I
And when
know.
I teach opera, I always say the overture puts you in the mood. It takes you
Yeah,
to the place,
yeah,
whether it's the Vespri Siciliani or the Flying Dutchman, whatever over or
yeah,
Rossini, whatever it is, they take you there.
yeah.
And we don't have to have action while it's being
No,
done. Now,
no.
there was a rather important British director who was once working with a rather important soprano, and I remember she said to him, this is my Violetta, not your Violetta.
Yeah, oh
And
God.
because he
Mm.
really had such broad ideas about her social status, and he was trying to teach her what kind of girl she was and her background. And this artist
Yeah,
knew her Violettas.
yeah.
And, she ultimately
Mm,
said, I'm doing my
mm.
Violetta. And if you want to build a production around me, you can. But it's my Violetta.
Gosh, oh gosh.
And,
Yeah,
it's a problem because
yeah.
again, you were talking about how certain of these directors arrive with everything planned.
Mm,
There's a very famous soprano I worked with for a number of years who
mm.
arrived with her performance already planned and
Yeah.
did not adapt or bend or grow in rehearsal.
No, no.
And she expected everyone to adapt to
Yeah,
her
yeah,
interpretation.
yeah.
Sometimes she was not the lead. She might have been the second lead
Yes. Okay.
in Arabella, where she didn't play Arabella, she played Zdenka, that kind of
Yeah,
thing. Is there a role
yeah,
for you in Arabella now that I think, could you play the
yeah,
father in Arabella?
yeah. The father. Yeah.
That's a
Um,
one. I think you'd be great in that role now
well,
that I think
actually,
about it.
you can't put this out there, Fred, because it's not confirmed. But I'm doing it at the Met in
Okay.
autumn 25.
All right. I should be a casting director.
You should put that up. Yeah, I'm doing it. Lisa Davidson's doing it,
Oh my.
and a wonderful Scandinavian baritone. Oh, the most beautiful. Oh, what's his name? Tall, handsome, beautiful baritone, Swedish. Uh,
Uh
he's doing his first.
who's younger? I mean, I'm thinking Bo Skovis, who's Danish, but
No, no,
he's
no, no.
still
This guy is only mid 40s now, late 40s. Oh, what's his name? Oh, wonderful voice. His name is gone. It's his
all right.
first Mandarika. Anyway, but yeah, I think we're doing a new production of it in
Yeah.
autumn. But yeah, I'm out there for that.
Good.
What were we talking about?
So you'll play Lisa Davidson's father. We were
I
talking about
am, yeah.
that's
And
great.
I've done quite a few things with Lisa. I mean, I sang in the ring when she was singing Friar, for crying out loud.
Wow.
As I dragged her off stage, I dragged her off stage in Rheingold. She had to sing da, 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 that top beat. Actually, it was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life, and my ears are still ringing now. And that she did her first Isolde with me, not Isolde, rubbish. She is doing her first Isolde with me.
Got it.
But we did no Act One, first Sieglinde,
Hmm.
in
Wow.
concert in Toronto with Andrew Davis.
And you were Hunding,
I was hunting. Simon O'Neill was
Siegmund.
Ziegmund,
Yeah.
and it was her first Sieglinde, and she stands next to you at the same height, and this voice started up. I thought, "Oh, this is just great. This is
Mhm.
just great."
No, it's very, very exciting. And I've met her. We spoke a little bit. We happened
Yeah,
to be seated next to one another at Zankel Hall a couple of years ago.
yeah,
And I love Norway. I've spent a lot of time there. I've
mm,
worked there a lot. I did a lot of Grieg related stuff and Ibsen related
yeah.
stuff. So we spoke about Norway, and she was very pleased not
Oh,
to speak about her voice and her career.
she's great. Do you know?
Yeah.
Do you know? There's a story with Lisa and I. In one sense, that we both have the same. I changed manager. You can put this out. You don't have to put this out, Freddie. But I changed manager 2 years ago to
Mhm.
Maria's manager, to Lisa's manager,
Lisa.
and this woman has changed my life completely. Now I do my first Hagen in end of April with Yurovsky, and I have lots of wonderful Parsifals new productions, and a lot of them are with Lisa, not Parsifal, of course, but And I remember when she just came out, fresh voice. You know, you thought, whoa, this is something quite special. And she's she obviously she's getting much better and better and better all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
she's an amazing thing. But yeah, I'm just I wanted to say that to you. I was talking about the fact that in the year that I do the period that I do more recitals is all the year where I have much more Wagner. It's really weird, but my staging career.
Well, that's the point, is that every bass I know has continued. We began our conversation by saying we need to create a fund at the
Yeah,
beginning of the careers for basses. At the end of the career, you have to give some of that money back.
yeah. And yeah, because I remember an old Italian bass once said to me, we were doing Louisa Miller together, and he was doing Valta, I was doing Wurm, and he said, "Hey, Bryn, the soprano, the tenor, they get the big role. They get Dresinum 1, Dresinum 2." He said, "Well, we bass, we last longer." I mean, if you're lucky, you can. I mean,
Yeah.
he said, if you can find the stage and face the audience, you'll work.
Yeah.
I'm kind of counting on that, really.
Yeah.
The trick is to hang on to the flexibility in your voice, and keep that going. I think because it's, and Fred is another conversation with young singers, young bassists, trying to get them not to sound like old man when you're 26.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I've been there. I'll be there tomorrow. I'm working with some people tomorrow, and I know what I'm going to get, and I know I'm going to say, "What are you doing?"
Try to remember the name of the character. It's in Puritani, who's the senior advisor. Sam Raimi played the role beautifully with Joan Sutherland. But that's a good role that a younger bass can play.
Yeah, great.
And kind of get away with it. And
get away with it. Yeah,
acquire some bel canto.
Yeah, Rodolfo in Sonambula. Those kind of roles.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to sing too loud. The problem is that people want basses to sing loud and big. We all have to sound like Fulanetto day one, and you can't. You just can't do, and that's the problem now, is especially with young artist programs. They've put a young artist on stage with Fulanetto, or something like that, on the big voices who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they're trying to think, hey, I can sing loud too, rah, and then they lose something. And I've heard this with basses, sometimes they come my way, and I know what they've been doing. They tried to sing Hagen or Hunding when you're 28 or something, and the voice just says, "No, I can't. I have no idea what I'm doing." Sorry, that's another whole subject.
But interestingly, I think you as a professional, I as a teacher, should think more about what we can give to bassists to do in their 20s and 30s that's meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just roles, but in terms of laying the foundations for then doing the Hundings and King Philip later on and Grand Inquisitors.
Yeah. I agree. I put them towards Shadow as much as possible. It's a little high if you're a real. Obviously, you come with a bass who's just got a low voice like that. He won't be able to sing Shadow or Figaro. That's when it's really tough, because a lot of stuff is just too high. The young man stuff is too high for them. So I just say, do Handel and put it in a key that you can sing it in.
Yeah.
And I don't mind if they want to transpose something down a semitone, just so we can show what you can do. Nobody's going to know in the audition panel. Just get it copied out and just sing it in the key that's comfortable. They're not got perfect pitch.
I heard that.
Sorry about that. But why? If you want to sing,
nobody knows.
Yeah, that's right. But sing songs, sing some a lot of, so you get the stamina. You build up the stamina to sing for an hour or more. But you don't have to sing loud. You don't have to go.
So, Brindley Sherratt, I must bring our conversation to a conclusion.
Okay.
But I would like, when you are in New York for whatever unannounced roles that you will be doing, I'm certainly going to attend your performances.
Yeah.
That we continue this in front of an audience in public in New York City.
Yeah, great.
That's the kind of thing I also do, and I think you have a lot to share and a lot to teach, and you do it very well. And you're a wonderful artist to watch and listen to. So I thank you so very much.
Thank you, Fred. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.